Victoria Ashford stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan penthouse, watching the city lights blur through tears she refused to let fall. The designer gown she wore, worth more than most people's annual salary, felt heavy against her skin, like armor that had failed to protect her when she needed it most. Behind her, the sounds of her charity gala continued, 300 of New York's elite mingling and laughing, completely unaware that their hostess had just discovered a betrayal so profound it threatened to shatter everything she believed about loyalty, friendship, and love. Just 20 minutes earlier, Victoria had been the picture of elegance and grace, gliding through her guests with practiced ease, her arm linked with that of her husband, Marcus Ashford, the tech mogul whose empire had made them one of the wealthiest couples in America. She had been searching for her best friend, Elena Rodriguez, the woman who had been by her side through every triumph and tragedy for the past 15 years. Elena, who had held her hand during 3 miscarriages, who had celebrated every business victory, who had been the maid of honor at her wedding, who had keys to every one of their homes and access to their most private moments. The search had led Victoria to Marcus's private study on the 3rd floor, a room that was supposed to be off-limits during events. She had expected to find Elena perhaps taking a phone call or touching up her makeup in the adjoining powder room. Instead, she had found something that would forever change the trajectory of her life. Through the slightly open door, she had seen Elena in Marcus's arms, their bodies pressed together in an embrace that spoke of intimacy and familiarity that could only come from months, perhaps years, of deception. But it wasn't just the physical betrayal that had sent ice through Victoria's veins. It was the conversation she had overheard, Elena's voice filled with a venom that Victoria had never heard before. "She's so naive, Marcus. Walking around like the perfect wife, the perfect philanthropist, never suspecting that her best friend and her husband have been laughing at her behind her back for 2 years. The charity work, the social events, all of it just makes her look more pathetic. A billionaire's wife playing at being meaningful while we've been building our real life together." Marcus's response had been even more devastating. "So we won't have to pretend anymore. Once the divorce papers are filed and the settlement is finalized, we can be together openly. She'll get her money, of course, but the real empire, the real power, that stays with me. With us." She never understood the business anyway, always focused on her causes and her feelings. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to fight it. Victoria had stood frozen in the hallway, her world crumbling around her, as she listened to the 2 people she trusted most dissect her life with surgical precision. They had discussed private moments she had shared with Elena, intimate conversations about her marriage, her struggles with fertility, her deepest fears and insecurities. All of it had been ammunition in their betrayal, shared between them like treasures stolen from her soul. They spoke of her with contempt disguised as pity, reducing 15 years of marriage and friendship to elaborate performances designed to keep her compliant and unsuspecting while they built their future on the ruins of her trust. The sound of Elena's laughter had finally broken Victoria's paralysis. It was a sound she had heard thousands of times, usually accompanying shared jokes or celebrating small victories. Now it sounded different, hollow and sharp like breaking glass. Victoria had backed away from the door, her mind racing as the full scope of the betrayal began to crystallize. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a recent attraction. This was a calculated, long-term deception that had been unfolding under her roof, financed by her money, enabled by her generosity and trust. Now, standing at her window while her guests continued their oblivious celebration below, Victoria felt something cold and sharp taking root where her heart used to be. Marcus and Elena thought they knew her, thought they had measured the depth of her strength and found it wanting. They had mistaken her kindness for weakness, her trust for stupidity, her love for blindness. They were about to discover just how dangerous it could be to underestimate a woman who had everything to lose and nothing left to protect except her own dignity. Victoria remained at the window for exactly 3 more minutes, allowing herself that time to feel the full weight of betrayal before transforming it into something far more useful: cold, calculating fury. She had not built a charitable empire worth hundreds of millions by being weak, despite what Marcus and Elena believed. Every foundation she ran, every cause she championed, required the same skills that had made her husband billions: strategic thinking, careful planning, and the ability to dismantle obstacles with surgical precision. They had forgotten that before she became Mrs. Marcus Ashford, she had been Victoria Chun, the daughter of immigrants who had clawed their way from a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens to Harvard Business School through sheer determination and intellect. She pulled her phone from her evening clutch and sent a text to her assistant, Sarah, who was somewhere in the crowd below. Emergency family situation. Please see that our guests are taken care of. I may be indisposed for the remainder of the evening. Within seconds, Sarah responded with professional efficiency, asking no questions, but confirming that everything would be handled seamlessly. This was why Victoria surrounded herself with competent people, a lesson she now realized she had failed to apply to her personal life. Moving with deliberate calm, Victoria walked to Marcus's desk and opened her laptop, which she had left there earlier when reviewing the evening's donation tallies. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she accessed accounts, files, and documents that painted a picture of their financial empire. What she discovered in the next 20 minutes made her betrayal feel like a flesh wound compared to the mortal blow she was now uncovering. Marcus hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been systematically moving assets, restructuring holdings, and preparing for a divorce that would leave her with a fraction of what she had helped build. The prenuptial agreement she had signed 15 years ago, when she was young and truly in love, had been carefully crafted to protect Marcus's existing wealth, but had failed to account for the empire they would build together. However, Marcus had been busy creating new legal structures that would retroactively classify her contributions as gifts rather than investments. Her name had been quietly removed from boards, her ownership stakes diluted through complex financial maneuvers that her trusting nature had allowed her to sign, without question, when Marcus claimed they were routine business adjustments. But Marcus had made one crucial error in his calculations. He had underestimated not just Victoria's intelligence, but also her connections. The charity work he dismissed as meaningless socializing had connected her with some of the most powerful attorneys, judges, forensic accountants, and business leaders in the country. People who owed her favors, who respected her work, who had seen her navigate complex negotiations and hostile board meetings with grace and steel. The network she had built through compassion and genuine dedication was about to become the instrument of justice. Victoria opened a new browser window and began making calls. The first was to James Morrison, the forensic accountant who had helped her expose financial irregularities in a major nonprofit 3 years earlier. James, I need you to drop everything and analyze some financial documents tonight. I'm sending them encrypted, and I need a full report by morning. Price is no object, and discretion is essential. His immediate agreement came with no questions asked, a testament to their professional relationship and her reputation for being thorough and fair in all her dealings. The second call went to Patricia Valdez, one of the most feared divorce attorneys in New York, known for her ability to uncover hidden assets and her absolute refusal to allow clients to be victimized by financial manipulation. Patricia, I need to retain your services immediately for what may become a very public and very complicated case. Can you meet me tomorrow morning at 8? Patricia's voice sharpened with interest when she heard Victoria's name, knowing that any case involving the Ashfords would be both challenging and potentially career-defining. The third call was to her private security firm, the same company that protected other high-profile individuals from corporate espionage and personal threats. I need complete surveillance reports on my husband and Elena Rodriguez for the past 6 months. Everything. Financial transactions, communications, travel patterns, meeting schedules. I also need security footage from all our properties reviewed for any unauthorized access or suspicious activities. The security chief's professional tone never wavered, even as he quoted a price that would have been shocking to most people, but was merely a line item in Victoria's pursuit of truth. As she worked, Victoria could hear the sounds of her own party continuing below, the laughter and conversation of people who had come to celebrate her charitable achievements while she prepared for war. The irony was not lost on her that she was using skills developed through years of helping others to now help herself in the most fundamental way possible. Every negotiation with stubborn donors, every confrontation with corrupt officials, every strategic campaign to expose wrongdoing had been preparation for this moment, though she had never imagined the enemy would be sleeping in her bed and sitting at her dinner table. By the time Victoria closed her laptop, she had set in motion an investigation that would strip away every lie, every hidden transaction, every secret meeting that Marcus and Elena thought they had conducted in darkness. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin, but tonight she had already won the first victory by refusing to be the naive victim they had counted on her being. The charity gala ended at midnight with the same flawless execution that had marked all of Victoria's events, but she remained in Marcus's study long after the last guest departed, her mind working through scenarios with the methodical precision of a general planning a decisive battle. Through the security monitors embedded in Marcus's desk, she watched Elena help coordinate the cleanup with the catering staff, playing the role of devoted friend with an Oscar-worthy performance. Elena moved through the penthouse with the familiarity of someone who considered it a second home, directing staff with an authority that now felt like a violation of every boundary Victoria had trustingly dissolved over the years of their friendship. Marcus appeared in the doorway at midnight, his bow tie loosened and his smile carrying the satisfied warmth of a man who believed his secrets were safe. "There you are, darling. Patricia Chin mentioned she couldn't find you for the final donation tally. Everything all right?" His use of her maiden name, something he did only when he was feeling particularly affectionate, sent a chill through Victoria as she realized how calculated even his most intimate gestures had become. She studied his face, searching for traces of the guilt or anxiety that should accompany such massive deception, but found only the practiced charm that had first attracted her 15 years ago and had apparently been concealing a stranger all along. "Just reviewing some financial projections," Victoria replied, her voice steady as she closed the laptop with deliberate calm. "I've been thinking about expanding our educational initiatives, particularly in areas where we can create more sustainable impact." The words came easily because they were true. She had indeed been planning expansion, though not the kind Marcus would expect. Her expansion would involve dismantling his carefully constructed web of financial manipulation and exposing every transaction he had hidden from her scrutiny. Marcus moved closer, and Victoria caught the faint scent of Elena's perfume clinging to his jacket, a detail that might have devastated her hours earlier, but now only strengthened her resolve. "You work too hard, Vic. All this charity business, all these causes, you could delegate more, enjoy life more. We have enough money to hire people to handle the details." His words carried a subtle dismissiveness that she now recognized as part of a pattern. Years of gentle discouragement designed to distance her from the financial and strategic aspects of their empire, while he restructured it to serve his own purposes. "Perhaps you're right," Victoria said, allowing a note of weariness to enter her voice. The performance came naturally because part of her was genuinely exhausted, not from work, but from years of loving people who had been systematically betraying her trust. "I've been feeling overwhelmed lately. Maybe it's time to step back from some responsibilities, focus on what really matters." She watched Marcus's face brighten with what he probably thought was relief, but which she now recognized as satisfaction at his manipulation's apparent success. Elena appeared in the doorway as if summoned by their conversation, her designer dress slightly wrinkled and her makeup showing the subtle signs of recent passion that only another woman would notice. "The caterers are finished, and I've handled the final coordination with your assistant," Elena announced, her voice carrying the warm efficiency that had made her indispensable to Victoria's operations. Sarah said to tell you that the preliminary donation total exceeded projections by 30%. Another triumph for the Victoria Ashford magic touch. Victoria felt a surge of bitter admiration for Elena's performance. Even now, hours after their intimate moment in this very room, Elena could stand before her and deliver praise with apparent sincerity, her eyes bright with what looked like genuine pride in Victoria's success. The skill required for such sustained deception was almost impressive, if it weren't so personally devastating. Victoria wondered how many times Elena had practiced these expressions in mirrors, perfecting the art of friendship while planning its destruction. "Elena, you've been such incredible support tonight," Victoria said, rising from Marcus's chair and moving toward her oldest friend with arms extended for an embrace. As they hugged, Victoria felt Elena's body tense almost imperceptibly, a reaction that might have been exhaustion, but which Victoria now interpreted as guilt or perhaps excitement at how perfectly their plan was proceeding. "I don't know what I would do without you. Honestly, you know me better than I know myself sometimes." The words were chosen carefully, carrying multiple meanings that only Victoria fully understood. Elena did know her well enough to have identified her vulnerabilities and exploited them with surgical precision. But Elena had also made the crucial error of underestimating the strength that lay beneath Victoria's trusting nature, the steel core that years of immigrant parents' expectations and business school competition had forged into an unbreakable foundation. As Elena pulled back from the embrace, her smile carried a flicker of something that might have been pity or triumph. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Victoria. I think you're capable of handling much more than you realize. Change can be difficult, but it often leads to growth we never expected." The words were delivered with apparent kindness, but Victoria heard them now as a warning or perhaps even a taunt, Elena's way of preparing her for the devastation they planned to unleash while maintaining plausible deniability about her role in the destruction. Marcus stepped closer, placing his arm around Victoria's shoulders in a gesture that would have felt protective hours earlier, but now felt possessive and false. "Both of you should get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day, and I have some business matters that might require attention." His casual mention of business matters sent another chill through Victoria, who suspected she was listening to oblique references to divorce proceedings and asset transfers that would reshape her life according to his agenda. "Yes," Victoria agreed, allowing herself to lean into Marcus's embrace while meeting Elena's eyes over his shoulder. "Tomorrow changes everything." Victoria woke before dawn in the guest bedroom she had chosen the night before, claiming she didn't want to disturb Marcus after his late business calls she now knew had likely been coordination sessions with Elena about their next moves. The irony of sleeping alone in her own home while her husband and best friend orchestrated her betrayal might have been crushing under different circumstances, but Victoria had spent the sleepless hours refining her strategy with a focused intensity that had once made her the youngest student body president in Harvard Business School history. By 6 a.m., her phone was already buzzing with responses from the professionals she had contacted, each message confirming that her network was mobilizing with the efficiency of a well-trained army. James Morrison's preliminary financial analysis arrived as an encrypted email that painted a picture of deception, so comprehensive it took Victoria's breath away. Marcus had been moving assets for over 18 months, creating shell companies and offshore accounts with Elena listed as a key beneficiary in structures so complex they would have taken teams of lawyers months to unravel in a conventional divorce. But the most damaging discovery was a series of transactions that suggested Marcus had been using Victoria's charitable foundations as vehicles for money laundering, routing questionable international investments through her humanitarian projects to give them legitimacy, while exposing her to potential criminal liability. The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow because it meant her life's work, the school she had built in Guatemala, the medical clinics in Kenya, the scholarship programs that had sent hundreds of underprivileged students to college, had all been contaminated by Marcus's greed. Every project she had poured her heart into, every life she had tried to improve, had been reduced to elaborate props in her husband's financial manipulations. The thought that investigators might one day tear apart her foundations, traumatizing the community she had tried to serve, filled her with a rage so pure it felt like molten steel in her veins. Patricia Valdez's text message was characteristically direct. Preliminary review suggests fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. This is bigger than divorce. This is RICO territory. Meet me in my office at 7 a.m. instead of 8. Bring everything. The reference to RICO, the law designed to prosecute organized crime, confirmed Victoria's growing suspicion that Marcus's betrayal extended far beyond adultery into criminal enterprise. Elena wasn't just stealing her husband. She was complicit in a scheme that threatened to destroy Victoria's reputation and possibly her freedom. Victoria dressed with military precision, choosing a charcoal gray suit that projected authority without ostentation. Her jewelry limited to the pearl earrings her mother had given her when she graduated from business school, a reminder of the strength that had carried her family from poverty to prominence. As she prepared to leave for Patricia's office, she caught her reflection in the bedroom mirror and was startled by the woman looking back at her. Gone was the soft, trusting expression that had marked her features for years. In its place was something harder, sharper, more focused, the face of someone who had been pushed too far and was ready to push back with devastating force. Marcus was still sleeping when Victoria left their penthouse, but she noticed Elena's car parked in their private garage, confirming that her former best friend had spent the night in what she probably thought was a subtle continuation of their deception. The sight of that familiar vehicle in the space Victoria had always considered sacred territory filled her with a cold fury that clarified her thinking like nothing else could. Elena hadn't just betrayed their friendship. She had moved into Victoria's life with the methodical precision of a parasite, consuming everything Victoria had built while wearing the mask of devoted loyalty. The early morning streets of Manhattan were nearly empty as Victoria's driver navigated toward Patricia Valdez's office, giving her time to review the security reports that had arrived overnight. The surveillance footage from their various properties told a story of systematic violation that went back nearly 2 years. Elena had been using her access to Victoria's homes to photograph documents, copy computer files, and conduct meetings with lawyers and financial advisors, all while Victoria traveled for charity work or attended board meetings, trusting that her best friend was simply maintaining their social calendar or coordinating household staff. One particular video clip made Victoria's hands shake with rage. Footage from their Hamptons house showing Elena in Marcus's arms on the very afternoon Victoria had called her from a refugee camp in Jordan, crying over the suffering she was witnessing and drawing comfort from Elena's sympathetic voice. While Victoria had been pouring her heart out over a crackling international connection, Elena had been in bed with Marcus, probably laughing at her naivety between their intimate moments. Patricia Valdez's office occupied the top 2 floors of a midtown skyscraper, and her reputation for ruthless efficiency was evident in every detail of the space. Awards and news clippings covered the walls, documenting cases where she had secured hundreds of millions in settlements for clients who had been betrayed by spouses, business partners, and trusted advisors. Patricia herself was a small, intense woman whose every movement radiated controlled aggression, and her eyes lit up with predatory interest as Victoria began outlining the scope of Marcus and Elena's deception. "This isn't just adultery and financial fraud," Patricia said after reviewing James Morrison's preliminary findings. "This is a criminal conspiracy that involves your charitable foundations, international money transfers, and potential RICO violations. Your husband and your friend haven't just betrayed you personally. They've made you an unwitting accomplice in what appears to be a massive money laundering operation. The good news is that we have evidence of your ignorance and their deception. The better news is that we're going to destroy them so completely that they'll wish they had never heard your name." Victoria felt something cold and sharp settle into her chest as she realized the full scope of the battle ahead. Marcus and Elena had underestimated her, but they had also made the fatal error of involving innocent people in their schemes, the communities and causes Victoria had spent years serving. This was no longer just about betrayal or divorce settlements. This was about justice for everyone they had used and everyone they had planned to sacrifice for their selfish ambitions. Victoria spent the next 72 hours transforming from betrayed wife into avenging angel, orchestrating a campaign of legal and financial warfare that would have impressed Sun Tzu himself. Patricia Valdez had assembled a team that included forensic accountants, cybersecurity experts, and federal prosecutors who specialized in white-collar crime. The evidence they uncovered painted a picture of corruption so vast that it stretched across 3 countries and involved shell companies, cryptocurrency transfers, and charitable fraud on an international scale. The turning point came when Victoria's security team discovered Elena's fatal mistake. She had been recording conversations with Marcus for over a year, apparently as insurance against potential betrayal. The recordings, stored on Elena's personal cloud account that she accessed from Victoria's home network, contained detailed discussions of their money laundering schemes, plans to frame Victoria for financial crimes, and chillingly casual conversations about having her declared mentally incompetent to prevent her from fighting the divorce. On the 4th morning after the gala, Victoria sat in Patricia's conference room, surrounded by evidence that would send both Marcus and Elena to federal prison. Bank records showed millions funneled through her charity accounts. Recorded conversations revealed plans to have Victoria committed to a psychiatric facility. Email chains detailed how they would sell her art collection and liquidate her personal investments while she was incapacitated. The betrayal was so comprehensive, so methodically evil, that even Patricia, who had seen the worst of human nature, seemed shaken by its scope. They weren't just stealing your money, Patricia explained, her voice tight with controlled anger. They were planning to steal your freedom, your reputation, and your sanity. The psychiatric evaluation Elena arranged for next week wasn't routine. It was the first step in having you declare incompetent. Your husband and best friend were literally planning to have you locked away so they could plunder everything you've built. Victoria absorbed this information with the calm of someone who had moved beyond shock into pure, crystalline fury. Marcus and Elena hadn't just betrayed her trust. They had planned to destroy her mind and spirit, to reduce her to a helpless victim while they celebrated their victory over her broken body. The realization that she had been living with 2 people who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to be eliminated filled her with a rage so cold and focused it felt like ice water in her veins. "When do we strike?" Victoria asked, her voice steady despite the volcanic anger building in her chest. Patricia smiled with predatory satisfaction. "Tonight. The federal warrants are being prepared now. By tomorrow morning, Marcus and Elena will be in federal custody on charges of conspiracy, money laundering, fraud, and attempted kidnapping. Their assets will be frozen, their communications monitored, and their freedom permanently revoked. They want to destroy you, Victoria. Instead, they've destroyed themselves." Victoria nodded, feeling something that might have been satisfaction if it weren't so cold and sharp. Marcus and Elena had spent 2 years planning her destruction, never realizing they were building the instruments of their own annihilation. The federal agents arrived at the Ashford penthouse at dawn, their footsteps echoing through the marble foyer like thunder announcing Judgment Day. Victoria watched from the security monitors in her study as Marcus answered the door in his silk pajamas, his face transforming from sleepy confusion to pale terror as the lead agent displayed badges and arrest warrants. Elena appeared moments later, wrapped in Victoria's own designer robe, a final insult that made Victoria's jaw clench with fury, her eyes wide with the shock of someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time. Victoria had positioned herself in the living room, dressed in a pristine white suit that symbolized both her innocence and her victory, as the agents led Marcus and Elena through their Miranda rights. The irony was exquisite. The same penthouse where they had planned her destruction was now witnessing their own downfall, surrounded by the art and luxury they had schemed to steal. Marcus's eyes found Victoria across the room, and she saw the exact moment he realized the magnitude of his miscalculation. The wife he had dismissed as naive and weak had orchestrated his complete annihilation. "You did this," Marcus whispered as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, his voice carrying a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You actually did this to me." Victoria rose from her chair with the grace of a queen addressing her subjects, her voice carrying across the room with crystalline clarity. "No, Marcus, you did this to yourself. Every fraudulent transaction, every recorded conversation, every plan to have me committed. You built your own prison with your arrogance and greed. I simply provided the key to the federal prosecutors." Elena's reaction was even more satisfying. The composed, manipulative woman who had played devoted friend for 2 years was sobbing uncontrollably, her carefully applied makeup streaming down her cheeks as she begged Victoria for mercy. "Please, Victoria, you don't understand. Marcus made me do it. He threatened me, manipulated me. I never wanted to hurt you. Our friendship meant everything to me." The pathetic lies only strengthened Victoria's resolve. Even facing federal prison, Elena couldn't abandon the manipulation and deception that had defined their relationship. Victoria walked closer, close enough to speak in a whisper that only Elena could hear. "Our friendship was performance, Elena. Every laugh we shared, every secret you kept, every tear you wiped away, all of it was preparation for this betrayal. You recorded your conversations with Marcus for insurance, but you never considered that your insurance policy would become evidence of your crimes." The lead federal agent approached Victoria with professional courtesy. "Mrs. Ashford, we'll need you to remain available for depositions, but you're not under investigation. The evidence clearly shows you were the victim of an elaborate conspiracy. Your cooperation in providing documents and recordings will be essential for prosecution." As Marcus and Elena were led away in handcuffs, Victoria felt a strange emptiness where her anger had been burning. Justice was being served, but the cost had been everything she had believed about love, friendship, and trust. The penthouse felt different now. No longer a home, but a museum of her naivety, filled with memories that had been poisoned by revelation. Patricia Valdez arrived within the hour, her satisfied smile reflecting the completeness of their victory. "The federal prosecutor says this will be one of the most comprehensive white-collar prosecutions in years. Marcus and Elena are looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison, and every asset they touched will be returned to you with interest. Your charitable foundations are being cleared of all suspicion, and your reputation will emerge from this stronger than ever." Victoria nodded, understanding that justice had been served, but wondering if victory always felt this hollow when it came at the cost of everything you once believed in. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the same floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, but the woman reflected in the glass bore little resemblance to the trusting wife who had discovered betrayal on the night of her charity gala. The federal trial had concluded with Marcus sentenced to 28 years for conspiracy, money laundering, and attempted kidnapping, while Elena received 22 years as his accomplice. The media had dubbed it the Millionaire's betrayal case, and Victoria had emerged not as a victim, but as a symbol of strength and justice for women who had been underestimated by those who claimed to love them. The financial recovery had exceeded even Patricia's optimistic projections. Every stolen dollar had been returned with compound interest, and the seized assets from Marcus's shell companies had increased Victoria's wealth by nearly $400 million. But more importantly, the investigation had exposed a network of corrupt financial advisors and complicit institutions that had enabled similar crimes against other wealthy women. Victoria's case had become the catalyst for new federal legislation protecting spouses from financial manipulation and fraud. Her charitable foundations had not only survived the scandal, but had grown exponentially as donors rallied to support a woman who had transformed personal betrayal into a platform for justice. The medical clinics in Kenya were expanding into 3 new countries. The schools in Guatemala had doubled their enrollment. The scholarship programs were sending record numbers of students to college. What Marcus and Elena had tried to destroy as props in their deception had become monuments to the power of turning pain into purpose. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from her new assistant. Sarah had been promoted to chief operating officer of all Victoria's charitable enterprises, her loyalty during the crisis earning her the trust that Victoria now granted sparingly, but completely. The documentary crew is here for your final interview. Are you ready? The question carried weight beyond scheduling because Victoria had agreed to share her story publicly for the first time, hoping it might help other women recognize the signs of systematic manipulation before it was too late. As she prepared to face the cameras, Victoria reflected on the lessons that betrayal had taught her. Trust was not weakness, but it required wisdom to distinguish between those who deserved it and those who exploited it. Kindness was not naivety, but it needed boundaries to prevent it from becoming a weapon in the hands of those who mistook gentleness for vulnerability. Love was not blind faith, but it demanded vigilance to protect it from those who would corrupt it for selfish gain. The documentary would air next month, titled Never Underestimate a Billionaire's Wife, and Victoria knew it would inspire women around the world who face their own battles against betrayal and manipulation. Her story had transformed from personal tragedy to universal message. Underestimate a woman's strength at your own peril, because the same intelligence that builds empires can just as easily destroy those who threaten them. Standing at her window one last time before the interview, Victoria thought about Marcus and Elena in their federal prison cells, probably still convinced that they had been the victims of her overreaction rather than the architects of their own destruction. They had spent 2 years planning her downfall, never realizing they were actually planning their own. They had mistaken her compassion for weakness, her trust for stupidity, her love for blindness. Their punishment fit their crime perfectly. They had tried to steal her freedom, and now they had lost their own forever. Victoria smiled as she walked toward the cameras, ready to tell the world what happened when you underestimate a woman who has everything to fight for and nothing left to lose except her dignity. Some lessons she had learned can only be taught through absolute devastation. Marcus and Elena had been excellent teachers.